published 12:43 est, the 14th of November 2017, updated 13:40 est, the 14th of November 2017. In early July, a huge crack in Antarctica's Larsen C ice shelf caused a trillion-ton iceberg, the third biggest ever recorded, to break off from the icy southern continent. The huge chunk of ice, dubbed iceberg a-68, measures 5,800 square kilometers (2,240 square miles), making it around the size of Delaware, or 4 times the area covered by Greater London. Now, NASA has been able to fly over the new megaberg to see it up close for the first time, and scientists admit they were stunned by just how big it is. Scroll down for video. The western edge of the famed iceberg a-68, carved from the Larsen C ice shelf, is seen from NASA's Operation Icebridge research aircraft, near the coast of the Antarctic Peninsula region, on October 31, 2017, above Antarctica. The massive iceberg was measured at approximately the size of Delaware when it first calved in July. In early July, a huge crack in Antarctica's Larsen C ice shelf caused a trillion-ton iceberg, the third biggest ever recorded, to break off from the icy southern continent. The huge chunk of ice, dubbed iceberg a-68, measures 5,800 square kilometers (2,240 square miles), making it around the size of Delaware, or 4 times the area covered by Greater London. I was aware that I would be seeing an iceberg the size of Delaware, but I wasn't prepared for how that would look from the air, said NASA's Katherine Hansen, one of the scientists on the flight. Most icebergs I have seen appear relatively small and blocky, and the entire part of the berg that rises above the ocean surface is visible at once. Not this berg. A-68 is so expansive it appears if it were still part of the ice shelf, but if you look far into the distance you can see a thin line of water between the iceberg and where the new front of the shelf begins. NASA hopes the flight, part of its Icebridge program, will help researchers understand the bedrock under the ice. This particular flight, however, aimed to get more than just a superficial look at Larsen C. To understand the system as a whole, scientists also want to know the bathymetry of the bedrock below, NASA said. The edge of A-68, the iceberg that carved from the Larsen C ice shelf. NASA hopes the flight, part of its Icebridge program, will help researchers understand the bedrock under the ice. To do that, the flight path was planned with gravity measurements in mind. While radar instruments can see through snow and ice on land to map the bedrock, radar has trouble when instead of land there is water below the ice. For the gravimeter, that's not a problem. The new flight lines, flown for the first time, followed the ground tracks of the future IceSat-2 satellite, and simultaneously increased the area of Larsen C mapped with a gravimeter. Earlier this year, detailed images from NASA's Landsat-8 show the widening gap between the main shelf and the iceberg, with a thin layer of loose, floating ice in between. Since the Delaware-sized chunk of ice, dubbed A-68, broke off the Antarctic shelf this summer, it's remained unclear what will happen to the giant mass, with fears it could break up into pieces too small to track on satellite, and drift into shipping lanes. Ice is seen from NASA's Operation Icebridge research aircraft in the Antarctic Peninsula region, on November 4, 2017, above Antarctica. I was aware that I would be seeing an iceberg the size of Delaware, but I wasn't prepared for how that would look from the air, said NASA's Katherine Hansen, one of the scientists on the flight. The new images captured on September 16 reveal a natural color and thermal view of the main iceberg and the ice shelf. Inside the gap, one particular iceberg stands out as much larger than the rest. This, according to NASA, has been drifting northward in the passage since the main chunk split off. A-68 is slowly drifting, a phenomenon that has become apparent as the separation between the two large bodies of ice continues to increase. The view from the P-3 after takeoff shows mountains that received an overnight dusting of snow in Ushuaia, Argentina. Right. Icebridge mission scientist John Sontag plays his guitar, following a long science flight. Both images show a thin layer of fragile ice, which does not offer much resistance as winds, tides, and currents try to move the massive iceberg away from the Larsen C ice shelf, NASA explains. In a few weeks of observations, scientists have seen the passage widen between the main iceberg and the front of the shelf. This slow widening comes after an initial back-and-forth movement in July broke the main berg in 2 large pieces, which the U.S. National Ice Center named A-68 and A-68B. The collisions also produced a handful of pieces too small to be named. Stunning new satellite images have revealed the movement of the massive iceberg that carved from the Larsen C ice shelf in July. The detailed images captured by instruments aboard NASA's Landsat 8 show the widening gap between the main shelf and the iceberg, with a thin layer of loose, floating ice in between since the Delaware-sized chunk of ice, dubbed a-68, broke off the Antarctic shelf this summer. It's remained unclear what will happen to the giant mass, with fears it could break up into pieces too small to track on satellite, and drift into shipping lanes. A thermal image of the iceberg is pictured. Additional satellite images captured last month show how the trillion-ton iceberg which broke off Antarctica has begun to drift farther out to sea. The huge chunk of ice, dubbed a-68, which is around the size of Delaware, 4 times the size of Greater London, made its final break back in July after a crack began to form in 2014. Professor Stef Lemit, of Delft University in the Netherlands, shared some of the latest satellite images of a-68 on Twitter. Sea ice floats near an island as seen from NASA's Operation Icebridge research aircraft in the Antarctic Peninsula region, on November 3, 2017, above Antarctica. Sea ice is seen from NASA's Operation Icebridge research aircraft in the Antarctic Peninsula region, on November 4, 2017, above Antarctica. He said after some initial backhand fifth movement, Larsen sees iceberg a-68 seems on drift now. He added that the iceberg continues to drift, and posted a graphic comparing a-68's position on Saturday to another image taken on Wednesday. The comparison shows a clear drift away from the Antarctic ice shelf. Scientists have claimed that global warming did not play a role in the carving of the iceberg, according to reports in The Independent. Dr. Natalie Robinson, a marine physicist at New Zealand's National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, told the site it was a normal, if relatively large, carving event and very different from the collapse of its neighboring ice shelves. New satellite images have shown that a trillion-ton iceberg which broke off Antarctica has begun to drift out to sea. Experts fear the break could see the berg disintegrate into pieces too small to track on satellite. If these drift into shipping lanes, they could pose a significant risk to vessels in the region. Professor Stef Lemit, of Delft University in the Netherlands, shared the latest satellite images of a-68 on Twitter. The comparison shows a clear drift away from the Antarctic ice shelf. National Center for Earth Observation scientists David Moore shared this up-to-date image of the region take with a Sentinel-3 satellite on September 16, but Professor Nancy Bertula, of the Antarctic Research Center at Victoria University of Wellington, said global warming and the hole in the ozone layer had caused the sudden breakup of numerous ice shelves in the region, some of which have been shown to have existed for 10,000 years or more. In early July, a huge crack in Antarctica's Larsen sea ice shelf caused the trillion-ton iceberg, the third biggest ever recorded, to break off from the icy southern continent. The huge chunk of ice, dubbed iceberg a-68, measures 5,800 square kilometers, 2,240 square miles, making it around the size of Delaware, or 4 times the area covered by Greater London. New pictures captured via satellite imagery show iceberg a-68 in stunning detail as it drifts from Antarctica, where it could remain in the open sea for years. Reporting this week in the Nature journal Climate Change, Dr. Anna Hogg and Dr. Hilmar Gudmundsson examine the events leading up to this dramatic natural phenomenon. They also discuss how carving of huge icebergs affects the stability of Antarctic ice shelves. Their article argues that a carving event is not necessarily due to changes in environmental conditions. Instead, it may simply reflect the natural growth and decay cycle of an ice shelf. Despite the iceberg breaking off sometime between July 10-12, scientists have struggled to take images of a-68 because Antarctica is currently going through its winter season. Since the split, researchers have relied on polar satellites like Sentinel-1, which uses radar to peer through thick cloud cover. But a few clear days in late July gave Spanish satellite firm Deimos Imaging a visible light view using Deimos 1 and Deimos 2, a pair of satellites that work as a tag team. These images are striking, easily the best I have seen since carving. Adrian Luckman, a glaciologist at Swansea University and a member of the Antarctic research program Project Midas, told Business Insider. The team's Deimos 1 satellite captures wide-angle, medium-resolution images while Deimos 2 takes zoomed-in, very high-resolution pictures. When combined, the images can capture both vast, wide-angle views of the scale of the Larsen Sea crack, as well as detailed up-close views of individual details. The team's Deimos-1 satellite captures wide-angle, medium-resolution images main image, while Deimos-2 takes zoomed-in, very high-resolution images. Insets the huge chunk of ice, dubbed iceberg a-68 by scientists, measures 5,800 square kilometers (2,240 square miles), making it around the size of Delaware, 4 times the area covered by Greater London. This wide-angle view shows iceberg a-68's central shape and Antarctica's Larsen C ice shelf. Rest of image and was taken by the Deimos-1 satellite in late July. New images follow the news that cracks were spreading where the a-68 iceberg broke free from the Larsen C ice shelf. Scientists released satellite footage of the moment the Antarctic peninsula lost 10% of its area earlier this month. Since that time, experts have been following the fate of the huge iceberg as a rift has grown between the mainland and the massive frozen water. They have found that cracks are still growing on the ice shelf, and if they continue to grow, it's possible that the ice shelf could collapse. If all of Larsen C collapses, the ice it holds back might add another 4 inches 10 centimeters to global sea levels over the years. Icebergs carve from Antarctica all the time, but because this one is particularly large, its path across the ocean needs to be monitored as it could pose a hazard to maritime traffic. The massive ice cube will float in water and by itself will not add to sea levels when it melts. But the real danger is from inland glaciers. Ice shelves float on the sea, extending from the coast, and are fed by slow-flowing glaciers from the land. They act as giant breaks, preventing glaciers from flowing directly into the ocean. If the glaciers held in check by Larsen C now split into the Antarctic Ocean, it could lift the global water mark by about 10 centimeters 4 inches, researchers have said. Dr. Anna Hogg, from the University of Leeds, and Dr. Hilmar Gudmundsson, from the British Antarctic Survey, have continued to track the iceberg, known as a-68, since the July 12 breakaway. Using the European Space Agency's ESA Copernicus Sentinel-1 satellite, they have found that, since the calving event, the berg has started to drift away from the Larsen's open ocean is now clearly visible in the approximately 5-kilometer gap between the berg and the ice shelf. A cluster of over 11 smaller icebergs have also now formed, the largest of which is over 8 miles 13 kilometers long. Dr. Anna Hogg, from the University of Leeds, and Dr. Hilmar Gudmundsson, from the British Antarctic Survey, have continued to track the iceberg, known as a-68, since the July 12 breakaway. This Sentinel-1 data shows network of cracks grow on the Larsen's ice shelf before and after the colossal iceberg broke free. These burgy bits, as the experts are describing them, have broken off both the giant iceberg and the remaining ice shelf. Dr. Hogg, an ESA research fellow in the Center for Polar Observation and Modeling at Leeds, said the satellite images reveal a lot of continuing action on Larsen's ice shelf. We can see that the remaining cracks continue to grow towards a feature called Borden ice rise, which provides important structural support for the remaining ice shelf. If an ice shelf loses contact with the ice rise, either through sustained thinning or a large iceberg calving event, it can prompt a significant acceleration in ice speed, and possibly further destabilization. It looks like the Larsen's story might not be over yet. This image shows the view of the a-68 iceberg from a European Copernicus Sentinel-1 satellite image acquired on July 30.